It's Armed Forces Week, so I also want to put on record my thanks for everybody in this country who has served and continues to serve, and pay a particular thank you to a man called Stuart Mendelsohn, who in Hertfordshire is involved in bringing veterans together in an initiative that he has set up, which is called Muster Point. It's a simple premise, but it's about bringing veterans together to meet, to socialise, to build networks and connections. He's had great success in doing that in Stevenage, working with my honourable friend, the member for Stevenage, and we are in the process of extending it to Welwyn Hatfield, and I want to put on record my thanks to Stuart. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's also the first time that I've had the opportunity to address the Chamber since the Prime Minister announced his resignation, and that's a moment of regret for me, and I do want to put on record my thanks to him for all of his service to my party and the country, and the fact that when he leaves office, most likely in a few weeks' time, defence spending today will be higher than it was at any point over the 5 previous Prime Ministers. The tone of the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, has changed somewhat since the initial speech by the Shadow Secretary of State, but I am going to re-inject a little bit of politics into the day, because I think it's important on Opposition Day that we assess whether the rhetoric of one party does match their record in office. And I want to go back to 2014, the moment in which Crimea was annexed by Putin, the moment which now I think people on all sides of politics is when we should have realised the depth of the threats that we faced in Europe. And at that moment in time, defence spending was 2.2%. And I had a look at what defence spending was in 2022, the moment at which the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. And defence spending in that 8-year period fell. It fell to just under 2.1%. So I'm afraid when they were in office, the Conservative Party didn't heed those warnings. I will give way to the Honourable.
Well, gentleman, for outlining those defence figures, but when his party came into office in 1997, defence spending was 3% of GDP, and when they left, it was 2.5%. So isn't his point, which I take, absolutely applicable to his party and his government too?
I'm pleased that he takes my point, but I think what we're saying is that the circumstances had changed, and that's why. I'll make the point. I'll give way in a second. That is why I intentionally picked those 2 dates. 2014, annexation of Crimea. 2022, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Those 2 points are indelibly linked. And our failure to act was a decisive moment in history. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. I'd like to point out that at the point during the last government, we were the 3rd highest spenders in NATO for defence spending. The rest of Europe was also not taking defence as seriously. We had all enjoyed the peace dividend, and nobody was spending money on defence like they should be. To that extent, though, we continue to maintain our presence within NATO, but now we are the 12th biggest spenders in NATO. So does his government not match the rhetoric that they're giving?
Yeah, exactly.
I thank you for his intervention, but is he therefore excusing the lack of investment in that period between 2014 and 2022? That's what I'm not sure of, because there are members on that side of the House who have been clear and consistent that they didn't serve in the Conservative government and they thought it was wrong that defence spending fell. I appreciate he wasn't here at that period, neither was I, but I don't know if that was his position. I'm going to make a little bit of progress, and this might... I'll make a little bit of progress, then I'll let other people in. And this may really upset some honourable members on the other side, so brace yourself. It is also the 10-year anniversary of Brexit. And it is the case that most members sat opposite me supported Brexit. And I raise it in the context of public spending choices, because what is now emphatically proven that the decision to leave the European Union has cost our economy tens and tens of billions of pounds. The estimate ranges between 4% of GDP and 6% of GDP, and that equates to a total of nearly £100 billion. So in a scenario where we've been remained members of the European Union, had a stronger economy, whoever was making the choices on defence would have been a far better place to invest. Does the honourable lady not agree?
And I stand here not as a Brexiteer, as somebody who was a reluctant Remainer. I voted for Remain partly because of the security of our country. But let me tell the gentleman now, there is no way that I regret that decision. I'm a pragmatic Brexiteer, like most of our country. But it's no good him standing there and bemoaning this, that and the other. The decision about the Defence Investment Plan falls on his government. What has stopped them getting on? If it's such a good idea, and I notice their benches are empty, why haven't they just got on and delivered it for the sake of our country?
Well, I'm pleased we were on the same side in 2016, and maybe we will be at some point again in the future, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me fast forward to 2024, because that point was a really important moment for the country. I will give way to him.
He talks about 2014 and the invasion. He's quite right. I was in Cabinet at the time. It was one of the points that I and some others raised, is what was our position over this. But actually also the EU got this very badly wrong, because the leader of France, the President, and also Mrs. Merkel themselves headed over on their own decision to set up a negotiation that left Russia in control of Crimea, forgetting all of the original support that they promises and our promises we've made to Ukraine. So it wasn't. They were reducing spending and they didn't want to go to war, and so they made sure that they sacrificed Ukraine in the process.
I'm not sure I'd agree with the characterisation of sacrificing Ukraine, but I'm also not saying that the European Union is blameless. I'm not saying the European Union is blameless. I'm saying that we had a period of history after Crimea where much of the West was not investing sufficiently in defence. But it is the case that it was the party opposite who were in government at that point in time. The point about 2024 is an important one. We had a decisive, a very important general election for the country. And so we hear now about the Conservatives prioritising defence. So I looked back at their record and their manifesto. And what was the offer to the country on the eve of the general election? A big cut in national insurance. A cut that was going to cost £10 billion a year. So again, when faced with a choice, this is 2 years into the Ukraine war, are you going to prioritise defence spending? That was not the choice that you made, was it not?
He talks about the Ukraine war. Madam Deputy Speaker, it has to be remembered, only one European country stood by Ukraine at the outset of that invasion. Our Secretary of State for Defence and the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson took the decision to arm Ukraine against the advice of the Foreign Office. Does he seriously think any other Prime Minister we can think of recently in this country would have defied the advice of the Foreign Office? And can he tell us which other European country had the strength to stand by Ukraine and keep them in the war so that Russia didn't get to Kyiv?
But the Prime Minister of the time had the full support of the then Leader of the Opposition and the now Prime Minister. That is the case. So we were united as a House on that. So I agree with him that Boris Johnson at that moment made the right judgment, but he had the full support of our Prime Minister today. I'm going to make some progress to talk about the record of this government. I know you're enjoying it. But it is really important, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we reflect on the progress and the investment that we have made. The aid to defence spending switch was not a policy that was universally welcomed on this side of the House, but I believe it was a necessary decision and the right decision to have been made. We've got the Type 26 frigate deal. We've got the Typhoon deal with Turkey. And we've got 13 new sites for munitions and factories that are so important for our rearmament. And the Armed Forces pay rise, the most generous and most urgently overdue pay rise for 20 years, again delivered by this government. And my final point on this, Madam Deputy Speaker, is we've had some really authoritative interventions today about the changing nature of warfare, and I have much to learn from other colleagues. I think it is to be applauded that this government is investing in drone warfare. My honourable friend, the member for Swindon North, has been a champion for investing in drone factories in his constituency. In just the last week, we have learnt about the development of long-range missiles which the UK and Ukraine are working on together without the need for US components. That is a very significant and welcome step forward. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is with regret that whilst I admire many people on the other side of the House, that the last government had every opportunity to increase investment in defence spending didn't take that option. And I'm afraid that the enduring image that has been left with the public is of the last Conservative Prime Minister leaving the beaches on D-Day early. It was a picture that I'm afraid told 1,000 words. Madam Deputy Speaker, in politics, parties need to be judged by their record and not just their rhetoric. I recognise that this government, I'm going to come to conclusion, I recognise that this government has lots more work to do. But under the watch of this Prime Minister, defence spending is up. It is higher than at any point in the last 14 years or the last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers. And whoever is the next leader of the Labour Party will have my support in increasing it further.
Hear, hear.